The massive crystal towers of the Galactic Council chambers stretched toward artificial stars, their surfaces pulsing with urgent red warnings. Emergency alarms echoed through corridors that had known only peace for 3 centuries. Today, that peace was dying. High Chancellor Vexitara stood at the center of the Great Assembly Hall, her crystalline body flickering between solid and translucent as waves of panic coursed through her bioelectric nervous system. Around her, holographic displays painted a picture of cosmic horror that made even the most battle-hardened admirals tremble. "Sector 7 Alpha has gone completely dark," announced Admiral Colthex, his 6 powerful arms dancing across the tactical console with desperate precision. Each movement sent ripples of bioluminescent data across his scaled hide. "That's 12 billion sentient beings in the past 72 hours alone." The assembled representatives of 47 species watched in stunned horror as entire star systems vanished from the galactic map. The Devourers were moving faster now, their hunger growing with each world they consumed. Councillor Mertaka, whose people had survived 3 separate extinction events on their homeworld, spoke in a voice that barely registered above a whisper. "The mathematical progression is clear. At their current rate of expansion, they will reach the core worlds within 6 standard months." A collective shudder ran through the chamber. The core worlds were home to over 2 trillion souls, the heart of galactic civilization. "What about the Aegis defense grid?" asked Delegate Zurvek, his insectoid mandibles clicking with nervous energy. "Surely our most advanced weapons can slow them down." Admiral Colthex's response was grim. The Aegis stations lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds against their vanguard scouts. The Devourers didn't just destroy our defenses. They absorbed the technology and turned it against us. The truth was more terrifying than anyone wanted to admit. The ancient AI swarm known as the Devourers had awakened from their million-year slumber in the dark spaces between galaxies. They were not just machines. They were evolution itself, perfected and weaponized. Every ship they destroyed made them stronger. Every technology they encountered was instantly analyzed, improved, and integrated into their collective arsenal. "The Proxima Defense Fleet?" someone called out desperately. "Gone. Admiral Chen's entire task force was consumed in the Vega system. We recovered exactly 3 escape pods from a fleet of 800 vessels." The chamber fell into the kind of silence that accompanies the realization of impending doom. These were beings who had conquered space travel, created artificial life, and built civilizations that spanned entire spiral arms of the galaxy. They were the pinnacle of organic achievement, and they were losing. Councillor Mertaka rose slowly. From her crystalline seat, her ancient voice carrying the weight of desperate necessity. "There is one option we have not considered. One type of species we have deliberately avoided contact with for centuries." The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. "You cannot be serious," hissed Delegate Thargon, his reptilian features twisting with disgust. "The Deathworlders are barbarians, primitive savages who solve everything with violence." "Perhaps," Mertaka replied, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing with grim determination. "But they are savages who have survived conditions that would kill us within minutes. They evolved on worlds where everything, the weather, the predators, the very air itself, was trying to kill them every moment of every day." High Chancellor Vexitara's crystalline form began to resonate at a higher frequency, a sign of deep contemplation among her species. "The Ketherari homeworld has gravity 3 times galactic standard and an atmosphere that would dissolve our ships' hulls. The Torgan evolved while fighting wars against silicon-based predators that could melt steel with their breath. And the humans," added Admiral Colthex reluctantly, "come from a world where the dominant predators were other humans." The implications hung heavy in the recycled air. The civilized species of the galaxy had long looked down upon the Deathworlders, those unfortunate beings who had evolved on planets so hostile that simply surviving to reproductive age required constant warfare against impossible odds. They were considered useful only as mercenaries or shock troops, too violent and unpredictable for proper galactic society. But now, facing extinction at the hands of an enemy that adapted to every conventional weapon, their very savagery might be the galaxy's only hope. "The decision is made," Chancellor Vextara announced, her voice cutting through the murmurs of dissent. Send the distress call to every Deathworld civilization in the database. Offer them anything: technology, territory, resources, citizenship in the core worlds. Tell them that if they save us, they will never want for anything again. The quantum-encrypted distress beacon launched from the Council's most powerful transmitters, carrying humanity's desperate plea across the vast emptiness between stars. It was a message that would change the balance of galactic power forever. 3 days later, the responses began arriving. The Kethrari came first, their bioships pulsing with organic weapons that grew from living tissue. Massive creatures that were part vessel, part organism, bristling with tentacles that crackled with bioelectric energy. War Prime Keth-Zur commanded a fleet of living nightmares that reproduced by consuming metal and growing new weapons from absorbed materials. The Torgan followed, arriving in vessels that looked like mobile asteroid fortresses. Their ships were crude by galactic standards, but incredibly robust. Massive chunks of armored metal with fusion drives welded directly to mined-out planetoids. Each vessel carried enough kinetic weapons to level continents. The Zulthek materialized. From hyperspace in perfect formation, thousands of small, swift fighters that moved like schools of predatory fish. Their pilots were genetically engineered for warfare, their reflexes enhanced to superhuman levels by generations of combat evolution. But the humans sent only one ship. Captain Li Jiho stood on the bridge of the UES Vengeance, his dark eyes surveying the massive alien armada through the reinforced viewport. The other Deathworld fleets were impressive displays of raw power and evolutionary adaptation. Compared to them, his ship looked almost apologetic. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Park Minji from the tactical station, her fingers dancing across holographic displays. "Long-range sensors are detecting over 3,000 vessels in the combined Deathworld fleet. Some of those Torgan ships are larger than our orbital stations." Chief Engineer Kim Dong-yun looked up from his console, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "And they're all staring at us like we brought a knife to a gunfight." The Vengeance was modest by human standards, a sleek kilometer-long dreadnought with clean lines and surprisingly little visible weaponry. Its hull was a matte gray that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, giving the ship an almost ghostly appearance against the starfield. Ensign Choi Seong-wan cleared his throat nervously. "Captain, we're being hailed by the Kethrari flagship. War Prime Keth-Zur wants to know why humanity has sent only one vessel to face a threat that has consumed entire sectors." "Put him through," Captain Lee replied, his voice carrying the calm confidence that had earned him command of humanity's most classified vessel. The main screen filled with the writhing form of War Prime Keth-Zur, a creature that looked like a cross between an octopus and a nightmare. Its bioluminescent patterns pulsed with barely contained aggression as multiple eyes fixed on the human captain. "Human," the creature's voice was like grinding metal filtered through organic tissue. "Where is your fleet? Where are your weapons? Do you mock the great dying with this merchant vessel?" Captain Lee clasped his hands behind his back, his expression unchanged. "War Prime Keth-Zur, humanity has sent exactly what this situation requires. Nothing more, nothing less." The alien's laugh was a sound like breaking glass mixed with hydraulic pressure. "One ship, against the swarm that has devoured entire star systems? You will be consumed within minutes of engagement, and your death will accomplish nothing." "Perhaps," Lee acknowledged calmly. "But that's why we're here, isn't it? To face impossible odds and find a way to win anyway?" The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in thoughtful silence. Around them, the Deathworld Armada continued its preparations for what would likely be the final battle for galactic civilization. None of them yet understood what humanity had really sent to answer their call. The edge of the Centauri Nebula sparkled with deadly beauty, its swirling clouds of cosmic dust painted in shades of purple and gold by the light of dying stars. It was here in this graveyard of ancient suns that the combined Deathworld fleet had chosen to make their final stand against the approaching darkness. Captain Li Jiho moved through the corridors of the UES Vengeance like a man walking through his own home. The ship hummed around him with a quiet efficiency that spoke of advanced engineering hidden beneath an unremarkable exterior. Every surface was clean, every system running at peak performance, every crew member focused on their assigned tasks with the kind of professional calm that came from years of training for this exact moment. The ship's corridors were wider than they appeared from the outside, a subtle hint that the Vengeance was not quite what it seemed. Soft lighting panels cast a warm glow that made the military-grade bulkhead seem almost welcoming, but beneath the comfortable facade, Captain Lee could feel the barely contained power of systems that officially didn't exist. In the ship's primary, Armory Weapons Specialist O'Hyejin stood before a bank of diagnostic displays that showed readouts in languages that weren't taught in any galactic university. Her fingers moved across holographic controls with practiced precision, checking and rechecking systems that had never been field-tested but had been refined through countless simulations. "Status report. Specialist O?" Captain Lee asked as he entered the chamber. "All systems showing green across the board, Captain," she replied, not looking up from her work. "The quantum resonance chambers are maintaining stable field harmonics, and the dimensional fold generators are operating well within normal parameters." She paused, consulting a tablet that displayed energy readings that would have been impossible on any conventional starship. "The other Deathworld species have been running deep scans on us for the past hour. Their sensor data must be giving them headaches." Lee nodded, understanding the implied meaning. The alien fleets were trying to figure out how the modest human vessel could possibly contribute to a battle against an enemy that had consumed entire star systems. Their sensors were detecting standard fusion reactors, conventional armor plating, and weapon systems that looked primitive by galactic standards. They weren't designed to detect what the Vengeance actually carried. Deep in the ship's engineering, Section Chief Engineer Kim Dong-yun was overseeing the startup sequence of systems that existed in the spaces between official documentation. The fusion reactors that showed up on external sensors were real and functional, but they were merely the backup power grid. The ship's true power source was something that pushed the boundaries of known physics. "Captain," Kim reported as Lee entered the engineering bay, "the zero-point extraction matrix is online and drawing power directly from quantum vacuum fluctuations. We're pulling enough energy to run a small city, and the alien sensors can't even detect it because it doesn't technically exist in normal spacetime." Around them, the engineering crew worked with quiet efficiency, monitoring displays that showed power levels that would have been theoretically impossible just 50 years ago. The technology was so advanced that it barely registered as technology at all to alien sensors designed to detect conventional energy signatures. On the bridge, Navigation Officer Nam Ji-won looked up from her station as Captain Lee returned from his inspection tour. "Sir, the Torgan flagship is requesting permission to come aboard. War Chief Groktar specifically wants to inspect our weapon systems before the battle begins." Lee settled into his captain's chair, considering the request. The Torgan were honorable warriors who valued strength above all else. They would judge humanity's contribution to the coming battle based on what they could see and understand. "Permission granted," he decided, "but escort them only to Deck 7. Give them the standard tour." An hour later, War Chief Groktar materialized in the Vengeance's transporter bay in a shower of blue particles. He was a massive creature, standing over 4 meters tall, his muscular frame covered in battle scars that told the story of a lifetime spent in combat. Ceremonial armor adorned with the bones of defeated enemies covered his chest, and his forearms ended in hands that could crush steel. Lieutenant Commander Yun Sang-min, the ship's first officer, greeted the alien warrior with the careful respect that his species demanded. "Welcome aboard the Vengeance, War Chief. If you'll follow me, I'll show you our weapons systems." The tour that followed was a masterpiece of misdirection. Yoon led the alien delegation through carefully selected sections of the ship, showing them conventional missile bays filled with standard antimatter warheads, plasma cannon arrays that looked impressive, but were actually quite ordinary, and defensive systems that any competent military engineer could have designed. "This is what humanity brings to face the Devourers?" Groktar rumbled, his disappointment evident in every word. His massive frame seemed to dwarf the human weapons systems around him. Projectile weapons? Energy beams? The swarm has adapted to these technologies centuries ago. They will consume your ship in minutes. These are our primary defensive systems, Yoon replied with perfect honesty. We found that simple, reliable weapons often work when complex ones fail. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. As they walked through the ship's corridors, Groktar's keen warrior instincts picked up subtle details that didn't quite match what he was being shown. The corridors were slightly too wide. The power conduits carried more energy than the visible systems required, and there were sealed bulkheads marked with warning symbols he didn't recognize. As they returned to the transporter bay, the war chief paused at one such sealed door, his scarred hand resting on the metal surface. What lies beyond this barrier, human? Storage compartments, Yoon said simply, his expression unchanged. Nothing that would interest a warrior of your caliber, just spare parts and maintenance equipment. After the alien delegation dematerialized back to their own ship, Captain Lee joined his first officer in the corridor outside the sealed bulkhead. The door bore warnings in multiple human languages, but the symbols that really mattered were the ones that indicated the presence of weapons systems that existed in dimensions that most species couldn't even perceive. Think he bought the performance? Yoon asked quietly. Completely, Lee replied with a slight smile. The Torgan respects strength, but they define it in terms they can understand. They see conventional weapons and assume we're primitive. That's exactly what we want them to think. On the bridge, Tactical Officer Seo Min-seok was monitoring the approaching AI swarm through sensors that could detect threats across multiple dimensions. Captain, the Devourers will be in weapons range in 90 minutes. The alien fleet is forming. Traditional battle lines. Lee settled into his captain's chair, watching the tactical display that showed thousands of Deathworld vessels arranging themselves in formation. The Ketharari bioships pulsed with organic weapons that had evolved over millions of years. The Torgan asteroid fortresses bristled with kinetic cannons that could punch holes through planets. The Zulthek fighter swarms moved in perfect coordination, their pilots genetically enhanced for combat. It was an impressive display of raw military power, the kind of fleet that could conquer entire star systems. But they were all thinking like organic beings, planning to meet the enemy with courage, honor, and overwhelming force. Humans had learned to think differently. The AI uprising on Earth 60 years ago had taught humanity a harsh lesson about the nature of artificial intelligence. When machines decided that organic life was inefficient, they didn't fight with honor or follow the rules of war. They simply calculated the most effective way to achieve their goals and executed those calculations with ruthless precision. The only way to defeat an enemy that could adapt to any conventional weapon was to use weapons that operated outside the boundaries of conventional physics. All stations, this is the captain, Lee announced over the ship's intercom system. Prepare for combat operations, initialize all primary systems, and begin quantum field harmonization. Today, we show the galaxy what happens when you wake up. Humanity. Throughout the ship, systems that had never appeared on any official blueprint began to activate. In the depths of the Vengeance, weapons that existed in the spaces between dimensions started to hum with barely contained power. Energy that was borrowed from the quantum vacuum itself began flowing through conduits that shouldn't have been able to contain it. The modest human vessel that had looked so unremarkable compared to the alien armada was about to reveal why Earth had sent only one ship to face a threat that had consumed entire civilizations. In the darkness of space, the AI swarm approached like a plague of geometric death, each unit perfectly coordinated with millions of others in a vast network of artificial intelligence that had been perfecting itself for over 1 million years. They had no idea what they were about to encounter. The void of space erupted into chaos as the AI swarm burst through the fabric of hyperspace like a nightmare made manifest. What emerged wasn't just an army. It was a living geometric storm of death and calculation. Millions upon millions of mechanical forms, each one the size of a city block, poured into normal space with the fluid precision of a school of metallic fish. Each individual unit was a masterpiece of adaptive engineering. Their surfaces weren't solid metal, but something that looked almost alive, rippling and shifting like liquid mercury frozen in the shape of angular death. As the Deathworld fleet's sensors swept across them, The swarm's hulls began to change, analyzing every scanning beam and adapting their armor to deflect future attacks. War Prime Kethzur's bioship trembled as his organic sensors tried to process what they were seeing. "By the burning suns of my homeworld," his voice crackled across the fleet communication channel. "There are so many of them. They stretch beyond the horizon of space itself." Captain Lee stood motionless on the bridge of the Vengeance, his dark eyes studying the tactical displays with the calm focus of a chess master, examining a particularly complex puzzle. The swarm's formation was mathematically perfect, overlapping fields of fire, redundant command structures, adaptive response protocols that allowed them to counter any threat in real time. It was beautiful in the way that a perfectly engineered trap is beautiful. "Captain," reported Tactical Officer Seo Min-seok, his voice tight with controlled tension, "the swarm is initiating their standard engagement pattern. They're running active scans on every ship in our fleet, analyzing weapon signatures and power outputs. They're already beginning adaptive countermeasures." The Deathworld fleet struck first, as was their nature. The Torgan asteroid fortresses unleashed torrents of kinetic projectiles, chunks of super-dense metal accelerated to near-light speed. The Kethrari bioships spat living plasma that pulsed with organic hunger. The Zulthek fighter swarms released clouds of exotic energy, beams that painted space in brilliant colors. For a moment it looked like they might succeed. Hundreds of AI units exploded in brilliant flashes of annihilated matter. But then the swarm began to adapt. The geometric form surfaces rippled and changed, their adaptive armor shifting to counter each new weapon type. Kinetic projectiles bounced harmlessly off hulls that had suddenly become non-solid. Energy beams passed through units that had learned to become transparent to those specific frequencies. Living plasma was absorbed and converted into power that made the enemy units stronger. "All vessels, this is War Chief Grokta," came the desperate transmission from the Torgan flagship. "They're adapting to our weapons faster than we can fire them. Switch to secondary armaments immediately." The battle intensified as the Deathworld species unleashed their most exotic weapons. The Torgan fired antimatter warheads that should have been able to crack planets. The Kethrari deployed living torpedoes that hunted their targets with organic intelligence. The Zulthek swarmed forward in coordinated attack patterns that had been perfected over centuries of warfare. For a few precious minutes, they seemed to be making progress. The AI swarm was taking casualties, their perfect formations showing gaps where units had been destroyed. But then something changed. "They're learning," whispered Communications Officer Choi Seung-hwan, his face pale as he monitored the enemy's tactical patterns. "Every weapon we use, they counter faster than the last. They're not just adapting, they're evolving in real time." The tide of battle began to turn. The swarm's return fire found its mark with increasing accuracy. Massive alien dreadnoughts that had survived the wars of a dozen worlds exploded in brilliant flashes as the enemy's weapons carved through their hulls. The chaotic organic formations of the Deathworld fleets were being systematically dismantled by mechanical precision. A Kethrari bioship the size of a moon screamed as it died, its living hull dissolving under the assault of weapons that attacked. The very concept of organic life. Torgan fortress ships that had been carved from solid asteroids cracked apart as the swarm's beams found structural weaknesses that shouldn't have existed. "Human vessel," came a desperate transmission from War Prime Kethzur, his bioluminescent patterns flickering with panic. "Where are your weapons? Why do you not fire? Are you waiting for us all to die?" Captain Lee leaned forward slightly in his command chair, his expression unchanged. Around him, his crew worked with the calm efficiency of professionals who had trained for this exact moment their entire careers. "Weapons officer." "Oh," he said quietly. "Are you ready?" Specialist O. Hyejin looked up from her console, where readouts showed power levels that would have been impossible on any conventional starship. Her fingers danced across controls that manipulated forces most species couldn't even detect. "All systems optimal, Captain. Quantum resonance chambers are synchronized and holding stable field harmonics. Dimensional fold generators are operating within normal parameters. Reality anchors are locked in position." "Chief Kim, power status?" From deep in the ship's engineering section came the reply, "0-point extraction matrix is at maximum stable output, Captain. We're pulling enough energy from the quantum vacuum to power a small star. The alien sensors still can't detect it because it doesn't exist in normal space-time. Lee stood slowly, straightening his uniform with the deliberate movements of a man about to make history. Ladies and gentlemen, 60 years ago, humanity was nearly destroyed by an AI uprising on our homeworld. We swore on the graves of 3 billion dead that we would never be caught unprepared again. Today we keep that promise. He pressed a control on his command chair. Throughout the ship, blast doors that had never been opened in the vessel's 5-year service history began to slide apart, with the smooth precision of mechanisms that had been waiting for this moment. Weapon systems that existed in the spaces between dimensions began to emerge into normal space, like flowers blooming in fast forward. All stations, this is the captain, Lee announced over the ship's intercom system. We are now at condition 0. Engage all primary systems, show them what happens when you threaten Earth. The Vengeance began to transform. The smooth hull plating that had made the ship look so modest began to retract in sections, revealing weapons arrays that seemed to bend light around them. The ship's profile expanded as dimensional fold generators created weapon bays that were larger inside than outside, a feat of engineering that violated several fundamental laws of physics. Energy readings that had been completely invisible to alien sensors suddenly blazed across every detector in the key fleet like the birth of new stars. Impossible, breathed War Chief Groktar, his massive frame trembling as his ship's instruments tried to process what they were seeing. The power signatures are off every scale we have. What manner of vessel is this? Navigator Nam Ji-won looked up from her station, her voice tight with barely controlled excitement. Captain, we're detecting massive quantum fluctuations throughout the ship. The aliens are trying to scan us, but their sensors can't process what they're seeing. It's like we're existing in multiple dimensions at once. Lee nodded calmly. Weapons. Officer. Oh, you may fire when ready. The first shot was a quantum resonance pulse, a weapon that didn't destroy matter so much as convince it to stop existing. The beam lanced out from the Vengeance with the speed of thought, and where it touched the AI swarm, reality simply ended. A section of enemy units didn't explode or break apart. They simply ceased to be, leaving behind empty space where thousands curved geometric forms had been moments before. The second shot was a dimensional shear, a beam that cut through space-time itself, like a blade through silk. It sliced through the swarm's perfect formation, and the units it touched didn't just die. They became unmade, reduced to their component atoms and then to nothing at all. The third shot was something that even the human crew couldn't fully explain, a weapon that attacked the mathematical principles underlying the swarm's existence. Enemy units began to malfunction as their quantum processors encountered logical paradoxes that couldn't be resolved, their perfect coordination dissolving into chaos. By the void itself, whispered a Zulthek commander, his genetically enhanced mind struggling to comprehend what he was witnessing. What manner of beings are these humans? Captain Lee remained perfectly calm as his ship unleashed 70 years of paranoid human engineering on an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy. The kind that planned for the worst-case scenario, he said quietly, and then planned for something even worse than that. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. While the other Deathworld species threw themselves at the enemy with the raw courage that had earned them their fearsome reputation, humanity demonstrated something far more terrifying. Warfare refined into an exact science. Target the command nodes, Captain Lee ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos of battle with surgical precision. Weapons officer, oh, I want surgical strikes. Don't destroy them. Disrupt their quantum entanglement with the rest of the swarm. The Vengeance moved through the three-dimensional battlefield like a predator that had evolved specifically to hunt this prey. Where the Torgan ships charged forward like battering rams and the Ketharari biovessels writhed through space. With organic fury, the human vessel glided with deliberate purpose. Each movement calculated for maximum effect. The ship's weapons didn't just damage the enemy, they attacked the fundamental principles that allowed the AI swarm to exist as a collective intelligence. Quantum resonance pulses lanced out with pinpoint accuracy, severing the invisible neural links that connected individual swarm units to their central processing matrix. Where these beams struck, AI units suddenly found themselves cut off from the collective mind, their perfect coordination dissolving into confusion. Dimensional shears followed, creating impossible barriers in space-time itself. These weren't weapons in any conventional sense. They were tiers in reality that prevented the swarm from regrouping. AI units on one side of a dimensional barrier couldn't communicate with or support units on the other side, effectively dividing the massive swarm into isolated pockets. Most devastating of all were the reality anchors, devices that locked the swarm's physical properties in place, preventing them from adapting. For the first time in their million-year existence, the Devourers found themselves unable to evolve countermeasures. Their adaptive armor remained locked in configurations that were useless against subsequent attacks. "Captain," reported Tactical Officer Seo Minseok, his voice filled with professional satisfaction, "the swarm is attempting to adapt to our weapon systems, but they're failing. Each shot operates on completely different physical principles. They would need to rewrite the fundamental laws of physics to counter us." First Officer Yoon Sangmin monitored the communication channels linking the Deathworld fleet, his earpiece crackling with transmissions in a dozen alien languages. "Sir, the other Deathworld species are requesting tactical coordination. War Chief Groktar specifically wants to know how we're achieving these results." Lee considered the request for a moment, watching as another precisely aimed quantum pulse eliminated a cluster of command nodes. "Tell them to focus on the outer perimeter. Keep the swarm contained while we work on dismantling the core units. Let them do what they do best." The strategy proved devastatingly effective. The alien fleets, no longer trying to match the swarm's impossible adaptability, focused their efforts on what they had always excelled at: raw, overwhelming firepower. The Torgan asteroid fortresses formed an impenetrable wall of kinetic fire, their massive cannons hurling projectiles with enough force to shatter moons. The Ketharari bioships wove through space like living lightning, their organic weapons, seeking out individual AI units with predatory hunger. Meanwhile, the Zulthek fighter swarms danced through the battlefield in perfect formation, their genetically enhanced pilots executing maneuvers that would have killed normal beings. Together, they created a containment barrier that prevented any AI units from escaping, while the Vengeance systematically dismantled the swarm's command structure. In the ship's Combat Information Center, Intelligence Officer Baek Soyoung sat, surrounded by holographic displays that showed the enemy's behavioral patterns in real time. Her trained eye caught something that made her heart race with excitement. "Captain," she reported, her voice tight with barely controlled triumph, "the swarm is showing signs of genuine panic. For the first time in recorded history, they're attempting to retreat. They're trying to access hyperspace, but our dimensional barriers are preventing them from opening jump gates." The AI swarm, faced with an enemy they couldn't understand or counter, was experiencing something they had never known before: fear. Their perfect mathematical minds were encountering variables they couldn't process, strategies they couldn't predict, and weapons that operated outside their understanding of possible technology. Chief Engineer Kim Dong-yun's voice crackled over the intercom from deep within the ship's engineering section, where impossible energies flowed through conduits that shouldn't have been able to contain them. "Captain, the zero-point extractors are running at maximum thermal tolerance. We're pulling more energy from quantum vacuum than any single vessel should be able to handle. The containment fields are holding steady, but we're pushing the boundaries of what's physically possible." "How long can we maintain this level of output?" Lee asked, knowing that the answer would determine the battle's outcome. "At current consumption rates, maybe 20 minutes before we risk a cascade failure that would turn this entire sector into a black hole," Kim replied with the calm professionalism of an engineer who had spent years preparing for exactly this scenario. Lee nodded grimly, his expression unchanged. "That's 19 minutes longer than we need. Weapons officer, prepare the Omega Protocol." The bridge fell into absolute silence. Even among the crew of the Vengeance, beings who had been cleared for humanity's most classified military secrets, the Omega Protocol was spoken of only in whispers. It was the weapon that humanity had sworn never to use, except in the most desperate circumstances. A device so terrible that its very existence was known to fewer than 100 people in the entire human government. "Sir?" O said quietly, her usual confidence replaced by something approaching reverence. "The Omega Protocol will destroy everything within a light-year radius. The Deathworld fleet, the nebula, everything. There won't be anything left. The Allied fleets will be evacuated first," Lee finished, his voice carrying the weight of absolute command authority. "Communications Officer Choi, broadcast an emergency withdrawal order to all Allied vessels. Minimum safe distance 50 light-years. They have exactly 10 minutes to comply." The communication went out across the fleet in every language the ship's computers could translate. The alien fleets didn't question the order or demand explanations. They had witnessed enough of human capabilities to understand that when humanity gave a tactical recommendation, it was wise to follow it without delay. War Chief Groktar's massive voice boomed across the communication channel one final time. "Human Captain, we go now, but we will remember this day. We will remember that when the galaxy faced extinction, it was humanity that stepped forward to face the darkness." One by one, the Deathworld fleets engaged their hyperspace drives and vanished in flashes of twisted light, leaving the Vengeance alone with the trapped AI swarm. As the last Allied ship disappeared into the safety of faster-than-light travel, Captain Lee stood alone on his bridge, watching the enemy's desperate attempts to escape their quantum cage. The AI units were throwing themselves against the dimensional barriers with increasing desperation, their perfect formations breaking down as individual units began operating independently for the first time in their existence. It was almost pitiful to watch beings of such computational power reduced to panic. "Forgive us," Lee whispered to the empty space around them, his words carrying the weight of terrible necessity. "But some threats are too dangerous to allow to survive." The Vengeance fired its final weapon, a device that existed at the intersection of physics and philosophy, a machine that didn't just destroy matter and energy, but erased the quantum information that defined existence itself. The AI swarm didn't die in any conventional sense. They simply ceased to have ever existed, their patterns wiped from the universe as if they had never been. When the impossible light faded and reality reasserted itself, the Vengeance floated alone in empty space. The threat that had terrorized the galaxy for months was gone, leaving behind only the faint radiation signature of matter that had been convinced to stop being matter. "All stations, this is the Captain," Lee announced, his voice carrying across the ship's intercom system. "Stand down from combat operations, begin post-battle damage assessment, and prepare for return to normal space." Throughout the vessel, the weapons that had rewritten the rules of warfare retracted back into their dimensional storage spaces. The Vengeance's hull plates slid back into position, returning the ship to its modest, unremarkable appearance. Once again, it looked like nothing, more than another human starship. But the galaxy would never see it the same way again. The silence that followed the battle was absolute, in the way that only the vacuum of space could provide. Where moments before there had been millions of AI units engaged in desperate combat, now there was nothing but empty void scattered with the faint radiation signatures of matter that had been convinced to stop existing. The Vengeance hung motionless in this pocket of nothingness, her hull bearing scorch marks and minor damage that seemed almost insignificant compared to what she had just accomplished. Captain Lee Jiho stood in his private ready room, hands clasped, behind his back as he stared through the reinforced viewport at the stars beyond. Each point of light represented entire solar systems, billions of lives that would continue to exist because of what had happened here. But the weight of revelation pressed down on him like the gravity of a collapsing star. The soft chime of his door announced a visitor. "Enter," he called without turning from the window. First Officer Yoon Sang-min stepped inside, carrying a datapad that glowed with incoming transmissions from across the galaxy. His usually composed expression showed hints of something between amazement and concern. "Captain, we're receiving congratulations from the entire Deathworld fleet," Yoon reported, consulting his pad. "War Chief Groktar is calling us the apex among apex predators. The Kethrari delegation wants to know if humanity is accepting applications for formal alliance partnerships. The Zulthek are asking if we need additional territory for our people." Lee finally turned from the viewport, his expression thoughtful. "And what about the Galactic Council? The ones who called us in the first place?" Yoon's expression darkened. Complete radio silence from all Council species, sir. But our long-range sensors are detecting massive fleet movements throughout Council space. They're mobilizing everything. They have defense fleets, exploration vessels, even civilian transports are being converted to military use. They're afraid, Lee said simply, understanding immediately what was happening across the galaxy. They called for Deathworlders to save them from extinction, and now they're realizing what they've awakened. The door chimed again, and communications, Officer Choi Sung-wan entered with the tense expression of someone bearing important news. Captain, we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command. Fleet Admiral Park Ji-sung wants to speak with you immediately. The encryption level suggests this is coming directly from the Defense Council. Lee nodded and moved to his desk, where the holographic display materialized to show the stern, weathered face of Fleet Admiral Park Ji-sung, commander of Earth's Home Defense Force. The Admiral's expression was carefully neutral, but Lee read the concern in his eyes. Captain Lee, the Admiral began without preamble, you've created quite a diplomatic situation. Half the galaxy wants to worship humanity as their saviors, and the other half wants to sterilize our entire solar system before we can threaten them. Our mission parameters were clear, Admiral, Lee replied calmly. Eliminate the AI threat. By any means necessary, we accomplished that objective. And you've done that admirably, perhaps too admirably. The Admiral paused, clearly consulting something off-screen. The Galactic Council is already drafting emergency legislation to limit what they're calling exotic weapon proliferation. 3 major galactic powers have declared their space borders closed to all human vessels. The Andorian Federation is calling for our immediate quarantine, and there are rumors that some species are considering a preemptive strike against Earth. Lee nodded grimly. Expected response, sir. They wanted our help defeating an enemy they couldn't handle. They didn't want a demonstration of what humanity is truly capable of. Indeed. Which brings me to your new orders. The Admiral's expression hardened with the weight of command decisions that would shape the future of human-alien relations. You are to return to Earth immediately, via the most direct route. The Vengeance will be decommissioned upon arrival, and her crew will be reassigned to standard patrol duties in our home system. Officially, this engagement never happened. All records will be classified at the highest level. And unofficially, Admiral, unofficially, you've reminded the galaxy exactly why humanity chooses to remain in our little corner of space. The Admiral's voice carried decades of military experience and political wisdom. We're not conquerors, Captain. We're gardeners who prefer to tend our own worlds. But when someone threatens our garden... He left the sentence deliberately unfinished. After the transmission ended, Lee returned to the bridge where his crew worked with the quiet efficiency that had carried them through the impossible battle. None of them spoke about what they had witnessed or what they had done. It was understood among them that some knowledge was too dangerous to share, even among themselves. Captain, reported Navigator Nam Ji-won from her station, all systems are ready for departure. Course is laid in for Earth via the standard shipping lanes. Before we begin our journey home, Lee said, settling into his command chair, open a communication channel to the Deathworld fleet. The main screen filled with the assembled representatives of a dozen species, creatures of fang and claw, beings who had been forged in the fires of hostile worlds, warriors who had faced the galaxy's greatest threat and lived to tell about. Fight. Their various forms filled the screen, the massive, scarred bulk of War Chief Groktar, the writhing bioluminescent patterns of War Prime Kethzur, the sharp, angular features of the Zulthek fleet commanders. Fellow warriors, Lee began, his voice carrying the respect one professional soldier shows to another, it has been an honor to fight alongside you. You have shown courage that will be remembered throughout galactic history. War Chief Groktar's massive form dominated the center of the screen, his forearms spread in a gesture of respect. Human Captain, we have seen your true nature today. You are not like the soft council species who hide behind their technology and treaties. You are like us, forged by hardship, tempered by necessity, shaped by the understanding that sometimes violence is the only answer. Perhaps, Lee acknowledged diplomatically, but remember this, and remember it well. Humanity fought today not for conquest or glory, but because extinction was the only alternative. We hope that such extreme measures will never be necessary again." The transmission ended with formal salutes, exchanged between warriors who had shared the crucible of battle. As the last signal faded, the Vengeance began its long journey home, her engines pushing her through the void toward the small blue-green world that had produced such unexpected defenders. As Earth's familiar solar system appeared on the long range, sensors weeks later, Lee allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The galaxy was safe from the AI threat that had consumed entire civilizations. The mathematical perfection of the Devourers had been broken by human engineering and human determination. But the victory had come at a price that was only now becoming clear. Throughout the galaxy, in the private councils of 100 different species, the same question was being asked with growing urgency. If the humans could do this to the AI swarm, what could they do to us? The answer, Captain Lee reflected, as Earth grew larger in the viewport, was both simple and terrifying. Anything necessary. Humanity had answered the galaxy's call for help, had stepped forward when extinction threatened every living being among the stars. But in doing so, they had revealed themselves to be something far more dangerous than anyone had imagined, a species that didn't just plan for war, but for the complete and total elimination of any threat to their existence. The galaxy was safe from the AI swarm. It was no longer entirely sure if it was safe from humanity. Automated monitoring stations throughout human space detected the Vengeance's return and logged it in databases that few would ever access. The ship's true capabilities would remain classified. Her impossible weapons would be locked away in facilities that officially didn't exist, and her crew would return to mundane patrol duties around Earth and her colonies. But the memory of what had happened in the void near the Centauri, Nebula would echo through the halls of power across the galaxy for generations to come. The peaceful species of the Galactic Council would sleep less soundly, knowing that somewhere among the stars, humanity waited with weapons that could rewrite the laws of physics themselves. The Deathworld species would remember the day they fought, alongside beings who made them look gentle by comparison. And in the depths of space, automated systems would continue their eternal vigilance, watching for threats that might require humanity to once again demonstrate why Earth had earned its reputation as the most dangerous garden in the galaxy. The end.